Uh, General, I understand that your alma mater, RIMC, is celebrating 100 years. Since we spoke about it in last episode, would you like to talk about it some more, this time as an institution, as an educational institution? What sets it apart? The people, the culture, the alumni, all of it? What is it that makes institutions of this kind relevant and significant, even after 100 years, in shaping the minds of soldiers, students, I would say? I think I'm very curious as an educator general to know how we as civilians can take some lessons out of the institutions, of these hallowed institutions, for our students.
Yes, I'll try and do that. Now, RIMC, I will discuss in two phases. Because I joined in 1941 when it was the British Raj.
Yes.
And the World War was on.
Right.
And the Japanese were knocking at our gate.
Mm.
The Japanese military, they conquering Burma, they were about to enter India, in the Manipur and Nagaland area. So the accentuation was very military. The training at the Indian Military Academy, which had been started in 1932, and the first set of commissioned boys in India came out in 1934. Field Marshal Sam Manickshaw was amongst those cadets who commissioned in 1934.
Okay.
The Indian Military Academy, which had a 2-year course for training of cadets, as they call them, and giving them a commission in the Indian Army. They reduced that 2 years course to 6 to 8 months course because of the war.
Okay.
So they were issuing temporary commissions. Since the boys who went through and got a commission in only 6 to 8 months rather than 2 years, they reduced the training schedule and commissioned them earlier because they were required in the field of battle. My brother Somnath was amongst them. He got his commission in early 1942. Right. So now, because of that, the feeder institutions like RIMC also had to get onto a war footing.
Okay.
So, all right, we were coming in at the age of 11. And the earliest age you could go to the Indian Military Academy was 18. So you had ostensibly 7 years training.
Right.
Right. From 11 to 18. And in this 7 years training, what happened is that you have to convert a young boy at the age of 11 into a person ready to go get his commission in 6 months' time at the age of 17 or 18.
Yeah.
And you had, in those days, we had the senior Cambridge examination, which is run by Cambridge University. And boys had to pass that. Those boys who were clever enough were allowed to go for higher Cambridge, which was 2 years further study required. But otherwise, those who were not that brainy and didn't want to go for further studies, they were given a year and a half or 2 years of what is known in RIMC as the army class. Okay. Army class was where you got more training into actual handling of weapons and actual handling of shooting and things like that. Plus more military drills, etc. All right. So now, the next point I want to cover is the teaching staff. Now, there is a difference in the teaching staff of the English teacher vis-a-vis today our Indian teacher. There's a difference in character and conduct. It's a difference of principles of life also. Now, whatever we may say about the fact that Britain conquered India and ruled us for 215 years, yes, if you hear people like Shashi Tharoor and other historians, you will find that they looted India, they did. You will find that the East India Company looted the various Maharajas of India. Robert Clive, for instance, went away to England with so many riches that he was a multi-billionaire with the stuff that he stolen from India.
Yes.
But one thing you have to respect is the British law. The British law even caught Robert Clive, and they literally took him to the cleaners in the British High Courts,
Okay.
removed all his wealth, you see, and I think brought him down to almost penury, besides jail sentences. So let us go into this British law, because that is the time when I joined RIMC at the age of 11. The British law functioned in India. British law, I don't know if you've read certain books like Mutiny on the Bounty, for instance.
Oh, no.
This is a British.
Okay.
It's a very interesting, all novels, Nivedita,
Mm.
they do show you human character and conduct of the story, whatever it is.
Right.
And since it's a story and you're interested,
Mm.
you should see how the various characters are functioning.
Okay.
That teaches you a lot of lessons as to what characteristics seem to work in the control of human beings and what does not work.
Mm.
So, Captain Bligh, as was his name,
Okay.
he sailed in his warship all the way from England
Mm.
to Australia and New Zealand
Mm.
in those days, right? 1700 and something. I'm not sure of the exact date. Now, there was a mutiny on board because he was a very stern captain. Captain had full rules. He represented the law of England on board ship.
Okay.
And since he was a cruel man and treated his sailors rather poorly,
Mm.
one of his foremen got the crew together and mutinied on the ship. They confined the captain, took over the ship, and landed in one of the South Sea Islands near Australia. And there they went on shore, and since there were Aboriginal people there, and these people were white men who had the knowledge of education and science and technology, and they had dropped their guns on shore, etc. So the question of fighting with these new white people who came onto the island was not there. The natives were subdued by their presence. And eventually these people settled down with the local people and married the local girls and had children and started becoming local, and they thought they'd make their own empire over there. But Captain Bligh was placed into a boat, a single boat with one little sail, and set adrift
Okay.
in the ocean, Pacific Ocean,
Mm.
to say, and with a few rations for a few days to say whether you survive or not, this is your future, to get out from here.
Mm.
So he set sail with a single man, and being a naval captain and knowing his navigation. Main thing about a captain on the ship is the navigation. On this boat, full of hunger and penury, after many days, he managed to come into the East Indies or whatever they are, those islands there, where some British outpost was there, and he landed up there, and from there he was recovered, almost half dead. And he was brought back to England, and he raised the claim of the mutiny against those men. With the result, the British Admiralty sent 3 warships to that island in the East Pacific to capture all those mutineers and bring them to the law, which they did. It took years, but it was done. Now you notice that certain crimes that are committed, let us say Osama bin Laden lately, because you know that history. All right, he did 9/11 according to the American intelligence. Whether it is so or not, we don't know. But they claimed it was Osama bin Laden who led this attack on New York. So as far as the American law, which is taken from the British law, is concerned, he has to be punished. And eventually, after many years, in the Obama administration, a special commando force was sent to Pakistan in Abbottabad, where they had located him by intelligence, paying a lot of money to one of his doctors who gave an injection to him or something.
Right.
Locate where he is, 10 commandos there to kill him or to bring him back for facing the law. But they killed him, and they took their body into the Arabian Sea and dropped it there somewhere so that the Muslims or the Pakistanis or the Al-Qaeda, whoever they were, would not be able to make a grave or something which they
Right.
sort of go and worship or something like that. It's the functioning of the law. So if somebody makes a crime, now take the Indian Mutiny, for instance, in 1857, when the revolt took place in the Bengal army, there's a film on this subject, right? I don't know if you see it, it's a Hindi film about one of the Jawans who led the mutiny.
Yeah.
Whole British battalion spent months to capture this one man and hang him in public, Mr. Dick. Right?
Right.
So that dignity of the law is now also available in the Indian law because our law is really based on the
Right.
British law.
Right.
Right? So now in that law, the first thing is the legal requirement for a military person to obey, obey orders. Now, when a young man, or for that matter, a young woman these days, gets into life, reach the ages of 15, 16, they revolt against their own parents. They think they know more in the world than anybody else. They don't want to listen to anyone. They want to live their life. And that factor has to be broken down. So I explained last time to you how as Edward, the Prince of Wales, who later became King Edward VIII, and had to abdicate the crown because he married Mrs. Simpson. Oh, he opened the school in 1922, and he said the first few blows on the human, I mean, is the one that forces the human weapon to get the strength and temper to face life battles. Now, you also asked me at that time, it's very cruel to be so hard to young children of 11 years of age, but that is how the training was. So the first thing that went to RIMC and different from Sherwood was the question of the obedience to the law and the fact that the cadets, senior cadets, would control the junior cadets. This gives responsibility to the students themselves. Now you have in civil schools also prefects and so on.
Right.
But many of the boys and girls don't listen to them. So how is the dignity of appointment enforced on the younger student population? So for instance, I explained to you that when I came at 11, I was punished by amongst two other friends by Mohammed Mumtaz, who was a cadet. I mean, he had done, if I was 11 years old, he must have been 15. To give the child at the age of 15 or 16, before he passes out from RIMC, the sense of discipline and loyalty to enforce that to his subordinate cadets, which does not, that strength does not obtain in the prefects of your normal civil schools.
Right.
And he says that because that's the law, because that is what is the orders are from the authorities of the school. That authority has to be accepted by all children, whether they like it or not. I also told you that the disobedience of this law would give you punishment.
Right.
Now let me talk about punishments. For any crime, there has to be a punishment. In the military system, if you've created a crime, you must be punished. That is also the dignity of the British law. You make a crime, you have to be punished. The question is for the judges to decide as to how much punishment.
How much? Yes.
Yeah, in India, we are a softer nature amongst our population. There's a lot of rehem-dil business going on. With the result, everybody says, "Oh, बेचारा को ये हो गया, उसकी देखो बीवी है, उसके बच्चे हैं, माफ कर दो." And to give lesser punishment, right? But if there's a bigger crime, then there's a bigger punishment.
Right.
The rest is the question of hanging in the civil courts.
Right.
You know, for so many years now, decades, the only person who's been hung is, I think, Kasab, who attacked the Taj hotels in
Bombay.
in 2021, and Afzal Guru, who was made responsible for the attack on Parliament.
Right.
Remember, some Pakistani terrorists came and tried to kill some politicians.
Yes.
I think the poor chaps a lot, but whatever. That chap was caught. The only person. Only decades, there's just been 2 hangings. Britain does more hangings. Hangings continue in America more than anybody else.
Right.
But in the continent, that's Europe, they passed a law that hanging is not correct. If God has given life to someone, then
You can't.
why should man be authorized to take away that life? So give some other punishment.
Right.
So you put it up into jail. So your jails are brimming.
Hmm.
You will recollect that the convicts who go to jail, they become so many
Hmm.
that the jails are overflowing.
Hmm.
So if the jails are designed for, let's say, 200 or 300 convicts, there are 2,000 convicts there.
Hmm.
You can imagine the pressure on latrines, on bathing,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
law and order problem inside that jail.
Right.
So now what's the idea of a jail? The idea of a jail is that you committed a crime. The courts have given you so many years of rigorous imprisonment.
Hmm.
Rigorous means hard physical effort, 3 times or 4 times a day you have to go run around breaking stones or something.
Hmm.
Now, what is the idea behind this? The idea is that the human being who has done something wrong should get a punishment to correct him,
Right.
so that he can be returned to society as a decent human being.
Right. They started as correction facilities. Right.
But that doesn't work, does it? Because there are
Yeah.
so many people who return
Hmm.
to civil life after so many years, and they just go and commit a rape or commit a murder or do something, or take revenge on those who got them into jail.
Right. Right.
So there are 2 sets of views. Now, for instance, Europe, Spain, Britain, France, Germany, France, etc., they say no hanging.
Hmm.
There was a case that India had to get a terrorist out from Spain.
Hmm.
They wouldn't send him to us because they said, you'll hang the German. And
Hmm.
we don't believe in hanging.
Hmm.
That's our law and that's their law. But the fact is he's given shelter in Spain. So we'll only send him back to you provided you give it in writing to us that he won't be hung. Anyway, now getting back to RIMC, and why I gave you all this information is the dignity of your law has to be obtained, and that obtains in the army or
Right.
rather in the military services.
Right.
See, it does not necessarily obtain in civil institutions. Because civil institutions are more generous and softer. Now, in the art of punishment, in a military setup, you are not allowed to use what is known as corporal punishment. Now, corporal punishment means beating the person, beating him with a cane,
Hmm. Hmm.
or slapping him, or thrashing him, or whatever. That is not acceptable. Because the dignity of the human being has to be maintained. And that dignity reduces if you start beating him up. So the punishment in military institutions is all physical. You have to wear a heavy pittu, as you call it, the back. Go running around till you are sweating from every pore of your body.
Right.
And you are very uncomfortable.
Right.
You have to 3 or 4 times a day. Or when everybody else is having an afternoon nap, you're running around in the heat, drilling up and down, and there's a sergeant or somebody doing that. Right? So to avoid that physical stress, you tend to obey the orders.
Right.
But that doesn't stop an adventurous person from still doing certain things which are against the so-called orders, like breaking bounds, for instance, when meet a girlfriend. So
Hmm.
that did happen. He takes that risk. If he gets caught, all right, he takes the punishment.
Right.
Now, go to Sherwood. The system of punishment in those days, I'm talking of Sherwood, I was there in 1936 at the age of 6.
Hmm.
And I think I got punished twice because I had 2 stints in Sherwood, as I told you last time.
Right.
One
Right.
was from the age of 6 to 11, and one was from after finishing my senior Cambridge at 15 and a half. I did another year in Sherwood to do my first 2 years of the Bachelor in Science, that is Intermediate Science
Hmm.
examination of the UP board. Right? I got punished twice. Now, if I explain to you what happened, I was in the middle dormitory in the junior school when I must have been about 13 years old or 12 years old. No, sorry, I beg your pardon. I must have been 8 years old. 8 years old. So one of the boys had lost a bet to me, a chap called Sammy Khan, who, by the way, later became an army commander in the Indian Army when I was a chief. He's a very good friend of mine.
That's
But we had a bet and he lost. So
Huh.
he had to give me hot gram. You know what hot gram is? People
No.
were very fond of hot gram. That chana and
okay.
semian sort of thing.
Yes. Yes.
With
Yes.
all the condiments and things inside it with a bit of chili.
The chana jor garam
Very much
kind of
like
thing.
it.
Huh.
I think it cost about 2 annas if you got a packet in those days.
Huh.
But the fact is, he owed me that, and he hadn't given it to me. So, as I told you, food in the dining hall was very poor. And we were always hungry. So I told Sammy that, you please give me my hot bread. She said, I'll give it to you later in the evening. Now, when the lights out took place in the dormitory, I got out of my bed and I crawled under the beds to his bed. I said, now give me my hot gram. So he gave me the hot gram and I started eating that. And meanwhile, the matron and the gym master, who's the husband, Mr. Fordham, as I recollect, they had heard some shuffling around. So they came and put on the lights and they found that I was not in my bed. They said, where's this guy? So I poked my head out from there. They said, all right, come out. So I was wearing my pajamas and Mr. Fordham had his cane. Now let me describe the cane to you. It's a flexible bamboo stick. It goes straight.
It makes a sound.
Let him have it on his back. On his bottom. Why bottom? Because the bottom is the fleshy part of the human body and therefore there's less injury. Since it's never been done to you, let me tell you, it stings like hell. You really have to rub yourself very hard. The second time was when I'd come for my interscenes. I'm getting a notice that the internet is a bit unstable. Let's see how long.
Right.
So now, when I was about 16 and I went 1946 back to Sherwood, on a Sunday morning, you're always hungry because you're not getting enough food. So the roll call had taken place in the morning. So 2 or 3 of us decided that let's break the bounds. Now, the next parade was the evening church parade. On a Sunday, you have to go to the church near the girls' school. We had a sister school called All Saints College. And they had a big church called St. Nicholas Church, which was near the government house. And we all went there for the various ceremonies of praying to the Lord Almighty. And so there was time. So we ran down the hill to Talital, where I must inform you, the dhabas give the most excellent aloo puri tari. So the Anglo-Indians and the British would call it puri tak. Tak is tarkari, puri tak. Now a couple of puris with that excellent tarkari made in UP. You don't belong to UP, so don't know this. But in temples, etc., you get tarkari made so good that you want to go there and eat it all the time. It's a very satisfying meal. So we rushed down the hill. We had our puri tarkari, we rushed up the hill, but the principal Benz was, I think he was a very good principal. He'd been principal for 32 years and he's a padri, to wear a round collar. Okay. He had a roll call at 11:30 in the morning, which is unfair of him really, because the roll call was supposed to be at 5 in the evening for the church. So we were caught out. And then I got 3 cuts of the cane from him also. All right. Those are 2 punishments in my whole tenure in Sherwood. In RIMC, when I was 11 years old, in our toilet, there were a large number of sinks, say about 10 or 12 sinks for the boys to brush their teeth and wash their faces. And then you went inside, there were toilet seats and there were tubs where you could have baths, you see. And outside this were 2 wooden towel racks. So now it's a very small wee chap and everybody's getting tall and I was getting left behind. So people said, if you hang yourself and stretch on a bar, you might become long, So when nobody was looking, I went to this toilet and this bar was there and I jumped up and caught hold of the bar and I started hanging. But it was a wooden bar and it broke. So in those days we had British sergeants, 3-stripers, who were responsible for looking after our dormitories and the discipline and our drill and physical training and so on. So that chap came around and he asked the question, who broke the bar? Everybody kept quiet. I mean, everybody had gone here and there. Now nobody knew. I also kept quiet. He worked it out. He said, where was everybody? Where were you? Where were you? And I said, I was here in the dormitory. He said, then he found I was the only chap in the dormitory. He said, so you went and hung on the bar. So I said, well, I had to become taller, you know. All right. So he said, you have to be punished. I was marched up to the agitator of the school, who's a British captain. So he said, are you guilty? Breaking the bar. I said, yes. He said, all right. 3 days extra drills. Now, the punishment here was that when everybody was enjoying a half an hour sleep before the next program, you have to be out of the drill square marching up and down in your full uniform with the pittu on your back. Did that for 3 days and all that. Barring 2 punishments, I didn't get anything more because I'm a highly disciplined person, I must tell you. But they certainly encouraged me to be more disciplined. It's differences of punishment. It's that whereas in military school, it was a physical punishment,
Right.
which hardened you, your body and your mind. In the English school that Sherwood, you were thrashed with a cane, which didn't make you feel too good.
Right.
And nor did it develop your, shall we say, physical capabilities, except that some of our boys who used to get punished very often, they used to have very hard bottoms, you know, and they wouldn't even cry if you thrashed them on the bottom. And many chaps used to put a lot of exercise books and all that in their shorts, you know, to sort of protect their bottom a bit. But the principal was too clever. He found that there were some lumps and bumps in your shorts as you bent up. He put his hand out and put out all the exercise books and you really got the. Okay. So that is the system of punishment in the two schools.
Right.
Now you ask as to what is the difference of the type of people who come there. Now I told you about the teachers. Let us talk about the teachers for a bit. Firstly, the teachers were English teachers. I mean the British teachers. And they were teaching all the subjects. If you look at these people, their whole life was just teaching. They joined the teaching profession from after passing college or whatever. And they dedicated themselves to that teaching for their whole life.
Right.
Now, RIMC, what is the difference between that and other schools is that RIMC was made for officer cadre of the Indian Army. You had other military schools like King George's schools, Sinawar in Kasoli, and another Lawrence school. Mr. Lawrence was actually, he made these schools for sergeants' children and Jawan's children. So Sinawar was in Lawrence School, Sinawar was in Kasoli, in North. And there was a Lawrence School, Lovedale, in the Utkamand Hills.
Yes. Yes.
The south, you see. Very good schools, but are made for the children of sergeants and men. Whereas RIMC is made for the children of the officer class, or for people who are to be trained for the officer class. Now, of course, it's all equal because everybody can become an officer depending on your capability. We're an independent nation where everybody is treated equally. Whereas in the British system, there's a separate thing for who has to become a soldier and who has to become an officer, right? So the teachers, English teachers, were very dedicated. They were very highly paid. He had a very comfortable life. Many of them were bachelors, but some of them who got married and had children, they were well enough financially to carry on with it. Our Indian teachers are not paid very well,
Right.
isn't it? Compared to anyone else.
Yeah.
If you really come to what the country needs is good medical systems and good educational systems. That means the doctors and teachers have to be paid well.
Right.
Otherwise, why should they dedicate their life?
Yeah.
So that's one difference. So this quality of teacher, this teacher who's to come to RIMC and also to show, they join the boys in every sport. They could play cricket with you, they could play hockey with you, they could play tennis with you, they could do swimming with you. And they also participated in the competitions. For instance, you have an athletics competition where you're running the 100 meters, or in those it was in yards, so it was 100 yards. And instead of 400 meters, it's 440 yards. And instead of half a mile, 800 meters, it was so many yards and so on, right? And we were in miles and yards rather than meters, kilometers, whatever. And you found that these masters used to join the senior cadets, for instance. It depends on your running status. to compete with you. Second point is that the number of students in the class are much less.
Okay.
In our Indian school, 45 students in a
Yeah.
class, and they never had more than 20 people in a class, like in Sherwood. And in RIMC, in my time, there were only 8 or 9 or 10 boys
Oh
in a
my
class.
God. Okay.
So, with the result, the teacher has a very good idea, the
Hmm.
class teacher, that is. But there are other
Right.
teachers. There's a physics teacher, and there's a mathematics teacher, and there's a science teacher, arts teacher, history teacher, languages teacher for Hindi and Urdu or whatever. But there is a class teacher who is responsible for writing your report. See? So get to know you very well. And therefore, there was a lot of encouragement to individual students to overcome their own deficiencies, to make better men. And the student knew that. Right? But like all good students, we do take on the teachers and we do try and break the rules when we can.
Right.
Because that sense of adventure
Right.
is not stopped in a young person. You know? Young person wants to do something, he goes ahead and tries to do it. If he gets caught, he accepts it. Now there's another aspect. How do you, when you make a mistake of something and you have to be punished,
Right.
do you accept it or you don't accept it? You see, it's a very interesting point. First, the requirement is for you to accept that you made the mistake. In other words, own up.
Oh no. Hmm.
For instance, somebody did something wrong and nobody knows who's done it. I'll give you an incident in Sherwood. Let's go back there. I must have been about 9 or 10 years old at that time. And you know, in the roll call, all these houses were lined up. My elder brother was the captain of Robin Hood House, and I was also in Robin Hood. And we hadn't come first, we'd come in second or something in the overall competitions per year. So we were lined up in the second line. And the champion house was in the front row.
Okay.
It's a quadrangle.
Hmm.
Quadrangle in the chapel on one side, and the classroom on one end, and the staircase going down to the lower course on the other. And on the fourth side is a card, you know, because it's a hill. It's in the hills. They're at about maybe 7,500 feet. So it's up and down. You see, so you've got a quadrangle and you're all lined up there. Now, what happened is that there were 3 girls' schools on Ayapata Hill. Now, naturally, the boys are very interested in those girls' schools. The first girls' school was All Saints College, where our sisters were. So our junior classes, let's say our 4th standard or 5th standard, used to play hockey against the 8th standard girls.
Okay.
But to make it physically equally matching.
Right.
When we used to play the hockey with the girls, I mean, the girls were very worried about us because we used to hit their shins with the ball or with the hockey stick. We used to wear pads, you know, on their shins to keep their shins safe. All right, but we got to know those, they were the more senior girls. And then my sisters were there, both my sisters, both elder than I. So we were introduced to many girls there. There was a valley between All Saints and Sherwood. And that was the golf course of the government house inside that valley. And so that was a meeting spot for boyfriends and girlfriends if they could escape from the eye of the teachers and go and meet each other. All right, that's part of it. You know, when you're reaching the age of 14 or 15, you get interested in the opposite side. What's it all about? There's a lot of mystery here. Everybody wants to know what the differences are and so on. Now, other than All Saints, there was the Wellesley Girls' School, a little down on the upper Ayapata Mall. From Sherwood, if you walk down towards Government House, it's a level thing. It's all at about 7,000 feet. So who came on the lower side of this, because it's a hill, was Wellesley School. And there were normal girls there. We used to pass by there, didn't take much interest in them. But further on, beyond our All Saints College, there was a St. Jesus and Mary's Convent.
Okay.
Now that's a Catholic girls' school. Their brothers were in another boys' school called St. Joseph's Academy, which is at the end there. So though the brothers were there and the sisters were here. So St. Joseph's Academy had their girlfriends and sisters, etc., in St. Mary's Convent. But the Sherwoodians, who knew all the girls in the All Saints, because they were their sisters, they were very interested indeed to see what the girls look like in St. Mary. It's a Jesus and Mary. Now they had a gate.
That's good.
It's a wall of about 6 feet or 7 feet tall, all round, on the side of the road that you were on the track, the upper by bottom, all of the big wall. So the principal of the nun who was in charge of Jesus Mary Convent complained to Mr. Binns, our principal, that 2 Sherwood boys were peeping at my girls from above this wall, which means they put stones and things outside the wall to get up to the height. And they were peeping at the girl to see what they look like. Okay. She made this complaint. So in the roll call in the morning, the principal, you know what happens is that the house captain takes the roll. Everybody, he got the list nominal. And as he calls out the names, you say present, present, present. So he makes them so that ticks them off. And if there's anybody absent, that's noted. And he gives the result to the house captain. And the house captain checks this result, and then he walks up to the principal and says, so many people present and so many people are absent, and this is the reason why they're absent. Then the principal does his morning address to the school, the senior school and junior school. So now Mr. Binns, he said, I have had a complaint from the principal of Jesus and Mary Convent that 2 Sherwood boys have been peeping over the wall at her girls. Now who were they? There's been drop silence. So that he carries on for a little while to give you a pep talk. He said, look, you have to be man enough that if you have done something wrong, that please own up. And this is the teaching of character. If you've done something wrong, be prepared to own up, say, yes, I did it. And be man enough to accept the punishment.
So I would,
so, look,
yeah, so that would scare them, no? How, I mean, why would you own up to get a cane thrashing?
Sorry?
They would own up to get a cane thrashing? That
you have to own up. Be man enough to own up, and whatever the punishment, it may be a cane thrashing, it may be something else.
Yeah.
Accept that because you did something wrong and you must, it's the British law. So pin drop silence. So he motivates you. He said, okay, now ask you. We are not only teaching you education, but we are teaching you character and conduct. Therefore, be man enough, right? And please own up. So a voice comes from one of the rear houses at the back to say, excuse me, sir, but how did she know there were Sherwood boys? She said, very good. Please come forward. So that young fellow comes by, about a 14-year-old kid. So, you were one of the ones who peeped. Principal. So he flusters and all that, then he hangs his head. He says, yes, sir. But sir, how does she know they were Sherwood? Somebody school, this is in Joseph school, right? And he said, who was the other chap? And that chap, he doesn't want his friend to sneak on him. Speaking is not allowed. So the chap said, it was me. So he also comes up. He said, all right. Now both of you bend over. And so he gives 3 cuts of the cane to both. That is over. Then he tells that if you do want to peep to the girls, why do you keep your school cap on?
God.
Now just look at it. If you examine this principle and how he's treated the kids, he's given them the punishment. He's also shown them that you have to be clever enough if you want to do something. Do it successfully, don't do it so that you get caught. Because after all, it's an innocent game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing serious here. They have not stolen money or something. They're peeping at the girls. So that is not such a big crime. But then if you want to do that, you're breaking the law, then please do it in such a way that you don't get caught.
But how sweet that they kept actually their caps and uniform on while looking at, oh, this is too sweet.
As you get older, you get more clever. So that's discipline. That's discipline. All right. Now the type of people who are coming to Sherwood are based on the money that the parents can spend for the fees. Okay. It's a boarding school, firstly. That means the parents are losing sight of their child for 9 months. School starts in middle March and ends in early December. 9 months they're away from the house. From age 6 upwards, right? And then you go home for 2-3 months and the school starts again. I mean, early December you go home and middle of March you come back. So 3 winter months, when it becomes very cold and full of snow in the hills, you go down to your parents. And so that is the life that you lead. And most of the boys who come from there are from the near about places like Lucknow, for instance, Bareilly, near Nainital, and the Rampur. You know, we had a lot of boys from Rampur. Now, Rampur is a lot of Nawabs of the ancient Mughal Empire, and many of them are very rich people and Nawabs, and they sent all their children to. I had a lot of friends from them also, and because it's a good education and a lot of discipline is being put into the boys. So Sherwood had people depending on those who could get admission and pay the money for the fees. In RIMC, the recruitment of boys was different. Since you're trying to get boys from the army, there was a very stern selection system.
Right.
This meant that at the age of 11, you're ready to go to RIMC. You have a union public service examination to pass first.
Oh my
To
God.
pass that. Yeah. Having passed that exam, then you have to get permission from your state government. Eventually, the military senior officer of, let us say, UP state, United Provinces, it was known as, would interview you before you join RIMC to see your fit. If he found you fit, then the governor had to interview.
That's a very young age to be interviewed by.
At age of 11.
Yeah.
So the governor has to interview. And after the governor has interviewed you, and he finds you fit, if he doesn't find you fit, you can't go. Then you pass an entrance examination to the RIMC run by the principal of the school, and the principal has to accept it.
Okay.
So the British system that was incorporated when I went there was this complicated, so that only boys who are totally loyal to the crown and from families who are loyal to the crown and are going to serve the British Empire would come for this trip. But once you got into RIMC, board and lodging was free, tuition was free. Your parents only had to pay a small amount for the adventurous activities, whatever they are. Right? So that means once the boy joined the school, the parents were free of the monetary problem and the education problem of their child.
Right.
And they knew that whatever happens to him, even if he doesn't join the army, he'll be a very highly disciplined and a very highly educated young man when he passes out from this institution.
Right.
See? All right. Now, the only reason why these boys could not join the military is if they medically failed the entrance to the military.
Okay.
Now, when you're at the age of 11, they do medical tests also. And you have to be medically fit before you can enter the school. But then as you grow older, certain diseases come into the body. And while you are being exercised and doing your drill and physical training and all that, and games and sport, injuries take place. So by the time the chap reaches the age of 18 to join the military academy, there's a medical board he has to pass. If he fails that, then he can't join the army or the military, and then joins the civil life, right? And they do very well there in location because they've got the background. So this is the point. So now the selection system is far more intense, shall I call it, to select the cream of the cream, as one might say.
Right.
After partition, this changed. After partition, since we are a free country, the government passed order that anyone who passes the test, whether they belong to a sort of a so-called superior, financially superior family or a family loyal to the state or something, anybody who passes should be permitted to come. But even then, the selection system today is very intense.
Okay.
I'll explain this system to you. If a boy wishes to join the RIMC, his parents want him to join, he has to pass an examination. Having passed the examination, every state of the country has certain vacancies. If you're a small state like Uttarakhand, you may have 2 vacancies for RIMC.
Okay.
Because the boys there only, in my time, only 130. Now they're 250. So if you take a population of India which goes into billions, it's too much, huh?
Right.
So to the state chief minister, whoever it is, who has to clear it. So what happens here is that because elections being what they are in India, and if the backward caste,
I think